is not going away.
The question is, as on the order papers, may I have say aye? Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We're now moving on to the final debate before the adjournment, and we come to the motion on access to, is it psilocybin? Sorry? Psilocybin, there you go. Access to psilocybin, I've learned something today, psilocybin treatments, and I'm going to learn a lot more, I suspect. Charlotte Nichols to move.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House has considered access to psilocybin treatments. Psilocybin is a psychoactive substance found in over 50 species of fungi, including many native varieties of mushroom that grow wild across the UK. There's a certain irony in this debate following on the debate on access to nature, as in many respects that is what our debate today is also on. This naturally occurring substance produces a window of neuroplasticity that lasts for a number of hours. When administered in a controlled environment with psychotherapeutic intent by trained professionals, psilocybin could be a powerful and effective tool to treat society's most complex mental health conditions, and it is this today that we call on the government to make possible. The evidential basis for psilocybin's current status as a Schedule 1 substance has never been reviewed since it was first controlled over 50 years ago, and there is an urgent and medically justified need to reschedule psilocybin under the 2001 regulations. It is unethical to deny this any longer. A review of the evidence of psilocybin's harms and utility with a view to rescheduling should be undertaken immediately. The use of psychedelics in medicine aren't, in fact, novel treatments and have been used throughout human history to treat the sick, from peyote ceremonies in Mexico, ayahuasca in the Amazon basin, and the San Pedro cactus in Peru. The earliest evidence of psychedelic use can be found in a cave in the Tassili and Ajar region of the Sahara Desert in Algeria, with a mural depicting what is referred to as the mushroom man or mushroom shaman, a bee-headed figure with mushrooms identified as psilocybe marae, native to the region, sprouting from his body. This mural has been dated as between 7,000 to 9,000 years old. The Selva Pascuala mural in a cave in Spain features mushrooms that researchers believe to be Psilocybe hispanica, a local species of psychedelic mushroom, and this mural is dated to be approximately 6,000 years old. And we can date back to the 13th century Western scientists first discussing the use of psychedelics in healthcare in Latin America. None of this is new. Modern psychedelic research began when Albert Hofmann first synthesized LSD in 1938, and this caused something of an explosion in interest by psychiatrists and psychologists, with studies from the period showing the safety and efficacy of psychedelics, including psilocybin, to treat a whole range of psychiatric conditions. All of this progress was, however, stalled by the countercultural movement of the 1960s, which ultimately led to its criminalization. Since then, we have been in a stasis until in recent years, something of a psychedelic renaissance among researchers has been taking place. And so to today. There are serious and considerable barriers to legitimate research associated with Schedule 1 regulations. While current legislation does not preclude scientific research with these drugs, it does make them significantly more difficult, time-consuming, and costly to study. And I want to share with the House just one example of this from a psychology PhD student called Rudy, whose thesis is investigating psychopharmaceutical treatments for addiction, a noble avenue of study, I'm sure we would all agree. Rudy was first motivated to undertake this research after reading incredible findings that psilocybin administration was associated with sustained nicotine cessation in humans. 80% of participants were abstinent after 6 months. And Rudy wanted to see if these results could be replicated to treat other addiction disorders. However, this was where he ran into problems due to the Schedule 1 status of psilocybin. He said, and I quote, "In order to undertake my research, I would have had to have spent upwards of £20,000 applying for Home Office Schedule 1 licenses and retrofitting my laboratory to the correct security standards. Meanwhile, I can work with heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine with no qualms. In light of this, I've had to modify my experiment to instead investigate the effects of ketamine. I find it shocking that this government is willing to throw life science research under the bus and push life sciences out of this country with an outdated and downright illegitimate understanding of the medical benefits psilocybin can provide. Please do what you can to fix this. Now, this is just one example, but at a recent seminar at the Royal Society of Chemistry with some of the country's most eminent neuroscientists, psychopharmacologists and psychiatrists, I spoke to countless researchers who have run into the same issues, making their research either needlessly more expensive or so prohibitively difficult to do that it's had to be abandoned. There is a huge credibility gap between psychiatry and politics for this reason. They can't understand why at a time when we claim that we're listening to experts in the field of health, and when this country is facing a mental health crisis, that we are satisfied with doing nothing in Westminster on this issue. Why do we set up expert bodies and not listen to them? It's dangerous, immoral, and unethical, and it's frankly offensive to both psychiatrists and their patients that we seem to think as politicians that we know better because of some moral panic 50 years ago. Multi-criteria decision analysis shows the comparative harms of various different kinds of drugs. Psilocybin is physiologically non-toxic and consistently found to be one of the safest controlled drugs, with the broader category of psychedelic compounds it falls into considered relatively safe physiologically and not drugs of dependence. The idea that psychedelics, including psilocybin, are dangerous is a myth created and perpetuated to justify keeping them illegal. Psychiatrists tell me that that psychedelics are the best clinical tool, the best bit of psychiatric equipment that they have, altering states of consciousness to allow for deeper processing and exploration of trauma, and opening a therapeutic window where treatments can work, versus suboptimal treatments with maintenance medications and substandard psychotherapies. And so to patients. There is not a single other field where we would accept a 90% failure rate as being acceptable. And yet in mental health treatment, this is where we are at. There are a number of mental health conditions, including things like borderline personality disorder, that we seem to be satisfied with having no proper treatments or cures for. Psilocybin has been shown in numerous studies globally to have a profound and lasting effect over placebos for a range of different mental health conditions, including treatment-resistant depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anorexia nervosa, and addiction. I want to talk first about one of those conditions, PTSD. I've referred previously to living with PTSD, and this is where my interest in the potential promise of psilocybin as a treatment first began, so consider this a declaration of interest. I was first diagnosed almost 2 years ago following being the victim of a crime, and I can't overstate the impact it has had on my life. This is a condition I can expect to live alongside, potentially indefinitely, and which can only ever be managed. It is a condition which for me has proved almost fatal. I manage it through a combination of a powerful SNRI, venlafaxine, taken daily, benzodiazepines taken for sleep and staving off a dissociative episode if I'm triggered by something, and regular therapy following an almost month-long period as a psychiatric inpatient, having been sectioned in 2021 for my own safety. I'm not telling the House this for sympathy, but because I hope my experience can be illustrative of just how debilitating a condition like this is. All of us will know that being an MP can be a difficult job at the best of times, but consider for a moment what it's like living with a condition like PTSD and the myriad of subtle and unsubtle ways my body lets me down. Having to put my best face on and go into a meeting after a panic attack, having the energy to make it through our long working hours after a virtually sleepless night plagued by night terrors, where I try to fight my attacker off me and wake up covered in bruises. Seeing someone who looks like my attacker on a tube platform and feeling a terror so acute that I want to jump in front of the oncoming train to make it stop. Going for walks until I'm exhausted and my feet bleeding in order to burn through the nervous energy that fizzes up inside me. Finding myself in dangerous situations and being more vulnerable as a result. A car going past and playing the song that was playing when my PTSD began and vomiting. Dissociating and losing time. Being angry, messy, erratic, crying at everything and nothing, and being snappy with my loved ones. Becoming convinced that ending my own life would be a kindness to all those who have had to deal with me throughout the worst period of it, from my staff to my family. Even at its best, it is a living hell. There is nothing I wouldn't give, nothing I wouldn't do to go back to who I was before my diagnosis. My experience is not unique. This is the reality of living with a serious mental health condition. I'm making it through as best I can because of the love and support of friends, colleagues, and psychiatric intervention. But I know that just as I'm a million miles better than I have been, and there are many more good days than bad these days, that I could easily relapse tomorrow because of something I can't plan for nor prevent. I'm hopeful that this sort of treatment may offer a light at the end of a very dark tunnel and finally give me my life back. The evidence shows that psilocybin, as with other psychedelics, can be such an effective treatment for PTSD that following a successful course of psychedelic-assisted therapy, many patients no longer fulfill the diagnostic criteria anymore. They are all but cured. But it is this Home Office and a scheduling policy that, against all the evidence, says this is not allowed, which is stopping that. It feels like institutional cruelty to condemn us to our misery when there are proven safe and effective treatment options if the government would only let us access them. And just as this is one story, my own experience, consider the millions of people in this country and around the world who will be living with the same, with no hope that things can or will ever get better. Depression is one of the most socially, medically, and economically burdensome diseases of the modern world. It is the single largest cause of global disability and leading contributor to suicide. An average of 18 people take their own lives every day. Up to 1/3 of people with depression do not respond to multiple courses of medication. An estimated 1.2 million adults in the UK living with treatment-resistant depression. The direct treatment and unemployment costs to the UK associated with depression in 2020 have been estimated at £10 billion. The human and economic burden of this condition is profound, and there are clear benefits in supporting the development of therapies that may be effective where all other treatments have failed. Mental health costs the UK £117.9 billion a year, around 5% of GDP, and yet this is not nearly enough money to address our current crisis, and waiting lists often years long for specialist treatment. There is both a moral and economic imperative for the government to act. We are being left behind as a nation. Some US states have legalized the use of psilocybin in mental health treatment. In 2018, it was granted breakthrough therapy status for depression by the United States Food and Drug Administration, expediting the research and approval process, with expected approval by the FDA in 2024. In Australia, from the 1st of July this year, medicines containing the psychedelic substances psilocybin and MDMA can be prescribed by specifically authorised psychiatrists for the treatment of certain mental health conditions. In Canada, healthcare practitioners may be able to access psilocybin for emergency treatment under a special access programme where a clinical trial is not available or suitable. We have charitable organisations in this country like Heroic Hearts who take veterans abroad to be able to access treatment they should be able to get in this country on our NHS. We have scientists, including the brilliant Dr. Ben Sessa, leaving the country in order to pursue research and treatment abroad. This is utterly, utterly shameful. And the real-world data from these countries will only make the case for change in the UK even less justifiable to continue to avoid. This motion would make no difference to the laws around recreational use or supply of psilocybin or magic mushrooms. Further, there's no evidence of diversion of Schedule II substances from clinical research. Use of psilocybin containing mushrooms is low, and there's no evidence of users developing a dependency. And as psilocybin mushrooms grow wild throughout the United Kingdom, psilocybin does not represent an opportunity for profit-motivated gangs and criminal individuals. These proposals do not risk increasing drug-related harms, but will allow us to assess and access the benefits of psilocybin as a substance. Of all of the psychedelic compounds which show promise in this area, with psilocybin having the lowest risk profile across all metrics, there is little reason not to reschedule it, but plenty of reasons to make the change as soon as possible. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that psilocybin does not pose a major risk to the individual, public health, or to social order. Its Schedule I designation is not morally, medically, or economically appropriate. We are supported in our call today by not only politicians from across the House, but the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the Campaign Against Living Miserably, the Conservative Drug Reform Group, Drug Science, Heroic Hearts, Cluster Busters, and SANE, among many other organisations. I thank the Bagpech Business Committee for having the political courage and will, sadly too often lacking in this place, to grant us this important debate today that we may move ahead on rescheduling psilocybin. Now it is the government's turn to show that political courage and will. Madam Deputy Speaker, psilocybin's current status as a Schedule 1 drug is incommensurate with the evidence of its harm and utility, and I beg the government to support our motion and to finally right the historic wrong of its schedule.
Thank you. I think the whole House will wish to commend the Honourable Lady on her courage in bringing this matter forward to the House and the way in which she has put her case this afternoon. The question is, as on the order paper, Crispin Blunt.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I wholly concur with your words about the Honourable Lady's speech? And can I also offer my thanks to the Backbench Business Committee for granting this debate? And they were plainly moved by the brilliant words crafted by the Honourable Lady for Warrington North that I was privileged to deliver to the committee on her behalf. I also thank the 25 parliamentary colleagues from across the House who supported the application for this debate on this apparently technical and, as we heard from your predecessor in the chair, tricky to pronounce subject. But it is of astonishing potential importance to the future of mental health treatment. This debate helpfully falls in Mental Health Awareness Week. The government is formally committed to evidence-based policy making. This is stressed in the White Paper of the 22nd of August 2022. There is an immediate need now to act on all the available evidence in respect of psilocybin. Having spent the last 6 years specialising in this area of failing policy around our countries addressing drugs and drug harms, and setting up a think tank on the subject to provide me with expert advice on the issue, I know the challenges all too well. On the 14th of March 2023, the Drugs Minister and I debated today's very issue on the adjournment of the House. I purposely used that debate to raise the principal issues engaged on this narrow question and to not seek answers from the Minister on that occasion, but to give him a little time to look at options to resolve them. It was already my intention to follow up this debate, to publicly demonstrate the cause is not just my view, but as the Honourable Lady said, they are widely shared by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, mental health charities, and Calm and Sane, a veterans charity Heroic Hearts, in which I happen to be a trustee, cluster headache organisation Cluster Busters, Drug Science, the drug charity chaired by the former chair of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, Professor David Nutt, and across this House. I wanted to give the forewarned Drugs Minister the opportunity today, in replying to this debate, to show that His Majesty's government understands the potential mental health treatment improvement engaged, and that it is now straining every bureaucratic and regulatory sinew to follow up the strongly indicative research evidence to date about its potential. I put that in terms in the previous debate. I said at column 805, I do not want or expect an answer this evening. These matters demand careful consideration. There will shortly be an application to the Backbench Business Committee, supported by more than a score of colleagues from across the House, for time for a fuller consideration. I hope by the time that debate is secured, we can enjoy the news that this Minister is taking the available opportunities of his very tough policy inheritance. It is now 2 months since that debate, and almost 6 years since the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs was first commissioned to look at the problem. So it is frustrating, to put it mildly, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it is the Drugs Minister's colleague who has been put forward to reply to this debate. I have the highest regard for my right honourable friend, and the quality of his attention to detail around issues he has been responsible for, such as planning, which is an issue of immense importance to my own constituents in Reigate. But this issue needs the policy minister across the complexities engaged and with the authority and the confidence of his colleagues to carry them with his strategy to enable the benefits that only bureaucratic inertia prevents. Where is the drugs minister? Having told him, in terms of today's opportunities, and the date when I had notice of it from the Backbench Business Committee of the identified date, it was my expectation that he would use today's opportunity to have spent the ensuing 2 months engaged with these issues and to be able to come forward to the House today. What are we to make of his absence today? What has he prioritised over Parliament? With notice. Does it remain his view that this issue is not a priority? Has he nothing new to say? Has he so little regard for the people who are raising this that he has prioritised the apparent visit scheduled for today, having initially tried to palm this off on the Minister for Medicine in the Department of Health and Social Care? My right honourable friend is now having to reply to this debate, where I already know the speech he is going to give on officials' advice. Now, the irony for my right honourable friend is that it should be the Minister for Medicine that is replying to this debate, but the Health Department doesn't own this policy. The Home Office does. And that is part of the reason our drugs policy is in such an unforgivable mess. I'm not sure who should be more insulted and put out by the Drugs Minister's dereliction of parliamentary duty. My right honourable friend answering, with no new defence to offer, or myself, who tried to create this opportunity and deliver an incentive to his colleague to get the necessary focus to clear the bureaucratic hurdles to enable this potential medicine. But what we can certainly conclude is that this Home Office, with the collective responsibility of all government ministers, can now be held accountable for the delay in delivering psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy and psychiatry as a new mental health treatment in the United Kingdom. And having heard the powerful opening speech from the Honourable Lady for Warrington North, it must be clear to any reasonable person the duty on Her Majesty's Government to act, and act now, has been established. The Honourable Lady for Warrington North, with personal courage of the highest order, has used her own massive trauma to advance the public interest engaged. She speaks for tens of thousands suffering from apparently untreatable, life-changing mental health trauma. How can my right honourable friend look our parliamentary colleague in the eye and read his prepared script? She also speaks for 1.2 million of our fellow citizens with depression. 125 end their battle every week by killing themselves. Knowing what they know, that now makes the government guilty of joint enterprise in those decisions, because we could and should now be on a path to avert them. She speaks for about 2,500 service veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan who have PTSD from their service that is currently untreatable. She speaks for Scotty, the ex-paratrooper, medically discharged after 15 years of service, who presented himself with military dignity on my train home last week to his fellow passengers. He gave his army number and his service record of 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he asked for food, not money, understanding that his health condition to be untreatable. He was apparently medically discharged after 15 years' service due to an untreatable mental health condition and, as the Honourable Lady referenced, a borderline personality disorder. His dignity in these appalling circumstances, when simply now under the care of his GP, being prescribed, it seems, every kind of chemical kosh going, but with no hope of cure was humbling. It is that absence of hope that I found so distressing. The current cost of depression alone to the United Kingdom economy is estimated to be around £110 billion a year, 5% of our GDP. Even if psilocybin delivered a fraction of what is hoped, the benefits to the economy would be immense, and to add hope to those suffering without it today, quite priceless. The ask is simple: that psilocybin be placed in the same schedule as heroin and cocaine, through an urgent review by the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs of the evidence of harms of this drug. The original controls were not based on a review of the available evidence, but simply on the fact that no product had yet reached market, which itself is an accident of history. No review has ever been conducted since, over half a century now. In what other area of policy would this be acceptable? Where it has been assessed, in Australia and the United States, for example, change has happened. It is especially shocking that psilocybin has never been subject to analysis of harm and utility when the government admits it is aware of the many studies regarding its potential therapeutic applications. Adding insult to injury, the government has also confirmed that it has no plans to commission the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs to assess the scheduling of psilocybin because it is, and I quote, not currently a priority. The potential treatment of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of mental health patients, is not a priority? Really? Really? Does scandalous do this position justice? If psilocybin treated a physical health condition like cancer or epilepsy, government inertia not to swiftly lift barriers into research and treatment with this levels of clinical potential and safety would not be tolerated. Let's not forget that within the last 4 months alone, Her Majesty's government has commissioned the ACMD to conduct rapid reviews of the evidence of the harms of both nitrous oxide and monkey dust. In the case of nitrous oxide, it took the ACMD 4 weeks to reply. It took the Home Office about 4 hours to formally ignore the advice. But we do know it is possible to commission a rapid review of harms. Why not for psilocybin? The Royal College of Psychiatrists and various mental health charities who wrote to him to say, and I also quote, "It is unethical to wait any longer. Psilocybin's Schedule 1 designation is not morally, medically, or economically appropriate." Now let me address the speech that we shall hear from the Immigration Minister. He will explain that research trials are possible under Schedule 1. While research into Schedule 1 drugs is possible, only a tiny fraction of the possible research actually takes place, almost all of which is conducted by large pharmaceutical companies trying to bring drugs to market. This red tape not only discourages competition, as only very big companies can afford to conduct the research, it also means that the research is unnecessarily expensive. It will be the taxpayer who ultimately picks up the bill through higher drug prices to the NHS. Moreover, leading UK academics have had to relocate to North America and Australia, where the research is easier. It's leading to a brain drain in this vital bioscience area, despite our desire to be a science superpower. Put simply, the Home Office is the enemy of the Prime Minister's aim to make Britain a centre of global bioscience. The Immigration Minister, reading his script, will explain that the barriers to research are already being investigated and that the ACMD are currently undertaking a review of the barriers to research into controlled drugs beyond cannabinoids. Now we're told that the Drugs Minister is apparently pressing for urgency on psilocybin. But it was 6 years ago, in 2017, that the government first asked the ACMD to review this. There is no current deadline for the completion of the current report. In 2017, the government rejected the ACMD's recommendations, just as it did with nitrous oxide recently. In the meantime, since 2017, 40,000 people with depression and trauma have taken their own lives. As butcher's bills go for government inaction, I hope that statistic alone will gain some attention. Is the government hoping that this issue will simply go away? Let me tell them it won't. But under current procedures, even if the ACMD are supportive of rescheduling, the government would still need to issue a further review to reschedule psilocybin under statute to the same schedule as heroin and cocaine, as the current review does not look at the evidence of harms for rescheduling specifically, meaning more delay, more deaths, more misery for those people suffering from depression who will eventually get treated with this pharmacology accompanying a psychotherapy and a psychiatry. Third, the government has also taken the view that specific compounds will be rescheduled once a drug containing psilocybin reaches market authorization. Nowhere in law, nor in the standard scheduling operating procedures by the ACMD, is this required. In truth, there are three routes to rescheduling: through market authorization, triggering a review of the scheduling of that product, rather than the generic compound, as was the case with Sativex in 2018, but also through the ACMD self-commissioning a review of the evidence, or the Home Office commissioning an ACMD review of the evidence. Waiting for a product to reach market authorization produces a catch-22 situation where a product can't be researched in the first place because the barriers of Schedule 1 are too high. But more importantly, rescheduling patented products only could create a pharmaceutical monopoly on a compound that grows naturally in the United Kingdom, increasing waiting times for patients and costs the NHS and ultimately for the taxpayer. The Home Office has the power to commission a review of the evidence, and there is precedent to commission such a review, as was the case with cannabis-based products for medicinal use. Indeed, in 2018, the wretched situation of just 2 epileptic children enabled change to start the deployment of cannabis-based medicines. But the regulatory treatment of the psychedelics, psilocybin in particular, remains unaddressed. Perhaps the Minister might have a go at advancing an explanation of why 1.2 million people with depression can go hang compared to the very deserving but relatively few epileptic children. But there is some good news in that thanks to the Chancellor's budget measures, psychedelics will benefit from the expedited approvals of medicines via the MHRA announced in the budget. While welcome, this would still leave UK patients without access until approval has been achieved abroad. Thus leaves the United Kingdom trailing behind Canada, Australia and the United States. In this scenario, the United Kingdom has become a world bioscience follower, not a leader, with the Home Office seeking to deny competitive advantage, indeed impose disadvantage on our prestigious universities and research companies. Fifth and finally, psilocybin has been consistently found to be one of the safest controlled drugs. It is physiologically non-toxic, there is no evidence of diversion from Schedule 2 substances of whatever danger from clinical research of any kind, and use of psilocybin containing mushrooms is low, and there is no evidence of users developing a dependency. Psilocybin mushrooms grow wild throughout the United Kingdom, meaning psilocybin does not represent an opportunity for profit-motivated gangs and criminals and criminal individuals. To argue that they might conceivably cause excessive damage to the population, especially when the task is for medical use under medical supervision, is nonsense, not least when tobacco and alcohol are already legal. If the Home Office is not prepared to act, surely it is now crucial that the ACMD demonstrate its independence and proactive approach by prioritising the well-being of patients in the United Kingdom, particularly given that it is chaired by a practising psychiatrist who enjoys the support of his Royal College. But here, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is perhaps time to reveal the Home Office's true regard for the advice and guidance from the regulatory body responsible for advice on drugs policy, set under statute from this House. It reports its total expenditure in 2019-20, the last year for which figures are available, as £46,000 and £46,067.34. This is to guide the government on drugs harms that cost the country an estimated £20 billion a year. It is perhaps unsurprising that proactive advice from the ACMD is somewhat rare. Surely, now the Minister, who has so kindly stood in for his colleague, may be appreciating the scale of the hospital pass he has received this afternoon. Adding the modest consideration that the size of the psychedelics market is set to grow to $10 billion by 2027, and that today's proposition enjoys 4-to-1 support with the public and has the potential to revolutionise the lives of millions, the Minister is invited to defend the government's position, which is both unethical, immoral, and wholly counter to the national interest, however we express it. It will not stand the test of time. Change it now.
Ronnie Cowan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a rare privilege for me to rise in this place and follow two such magnificent speeches from across these benches. And it's a fact that when we find ourselves with cross-party support on something, we tend to be able to back off and just talk sense about things and stop trying to score political points off each other. And then I look at the front bench and I understand the Minister must be asking himself the question, why on earth am I here today? The government have got a history of doing this. When we bring forward debates, particularly around drugs, and it's clearly an issue for the Home Office, they send a Health Minister. And when it's clearly something about health, they send a Home Office Minister. This is not new. Sorry, Minister, you're not the first to be put in this position, but you're here today and you will answer to these speeches here today. And I hope I'm not going to rehearse everything that's been said already so eloquently. There's no need. If you've been listening, you've heard the points, the number of people who suffer from mental health conditions who can benefit from psilocybin, the lack of research. You've heard all this. I don't have to tell you this again. But what I will say is that
It's me, the Honourable Gentleman. We'll just say he and not you. Well, we won't make a fuss about it, but that's so.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, for once again correcting me. Since announcing that I was taking part in this debate, I've been inundated with briefings from a wide range of individuals and organisations. Every one of them was welcomed. Not being medically trained, it took me some time to read through and absorb what I was being told. I have my own views on the issue and the path forward, but it's always worthwhile listening to those who agree and disagree with me. How else can I develop a well-rounded and balanced approach? Which is why it's interesting to note that the motion we are debating states that no review of the evidence for psilocybin's current status under UK law has ever been conducted. And as has been said, it currently has a status of Schedule 1 under the Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2001, which makes it, in the view of the UK government, with no review of the evidence, more dangerous than heroin or cocaine. Psilocybin, a drug that you can't overdose on, a drug that has low addictive qualities. We have legislation based on preconceptions rather than evidence. It's nonsensical. Well, I think it is, but clearly the UK government doesn't. They actively support the current situation. Psilocybin has been pushed to the back of the drugs cabinet and left there, almost but not quite forgotten. In the USA, especially in Oregon and Colorado, they are way ahead of us in producing medical research. I also know that Australia has taken a lead in this field too. In the UK, being a Schedule 1 does not completely prevent research, but the researchers themselves have raised the issues of increased administrative and financial costs. We should not be placing barriers in the way of research. We should be supporting and encouraging it and using it to help us legislate properly. And it isn't just me saying that. This month, the Royal College of Psychiatrists wrote to the Minister of State for Crime, Policing and Fire, calling for the same change as we have in this motion. People are suffering from mental health issues that existing evidence tells us would benefit from psilocybin administered by the right people in the right way. We should be pursuing that avenue of research and developing the support and professional skills required. And finally, I hope before the Minister responds that he considers that this motion is not about recreational use. It's not about dictating the uses for psilocybin or those who would benefit. All we are asking for in this motion is that the UK Government conduct an urgent review of the evidence for psilocybin's current status as Schedule 1 under the Misuse of Drugs Regulation 2001. That's it. That's what we're asking for. This would allow better opportunities for the required medical research to be completed. That research will help us provide appropriate medical support for those suffering from a range of conditions. Why would the UK Government not want this? Why would they continue to obstruct the research? I look forward to the Minister's response.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I add my voice to those who paid tribute to the speech of the Honourable Lady, and she said she wasn't asking the House for sympathy, but she has the sympathy of the House, and I'm sure of anybody who watched that, who will watch her speech on film, which I hope many people will do. And my heart goes out to her for all that she's been through. I also hope more people see my honourable friend's from Reigate's speech. Deserves very wide circulation. He's a tremendous campaigner on many issues, not of all of which I join with him on, but I sympathise on with what he's trying to do today, and I particularly acknowledge and want to add my voice to his point about the suffering of our veterans. And as the member for a large military community, I echo that. Too many of our former service people suffer appallingly from PTSD, and we need to do more to help them, and this might be part of the answer. And the Honourable Lady and the Honourable Gentleman both cited studies suggesting that the efficacy of psilocybin is similar or superior to that of pharmaceutical interventions, SSRI drugs in particular, and I think that's very, very significant, and I do think that we need to research, more research, to test that, because if true, it is tremendously positive news, because crucially, the evidence suggests psilocybin is not dependency forming. It's not toxic, and it doesn't form dependency. And I speak as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on prescribed drug dependency. And the research done by colleagues supporting that APPG has laid bare the degree of dependence on prescribed drugs that exist in our country. We're not talking about illegal drugs here, we're talking about drugs administered by doctors, generally in response to mental health conditions, to depression, most of all. And a fifth of the adult population is on some sort of dependency-forming drug, such as SSRIs. Many of those absolutely appropriately, and the Honourable Lady mentioned that she takes an SSRI, but that is a very high rate. And crucially, and I think most worryingly, the fact is that many people who are taking prescribed drugs were only prescribed them according to the guidance that accompanies these drugs. They were only prescribed for a certain number of months, and yet because doctors repeat prescriptions and because we have such an inadequate system of withdrawal support for people in this country, they are prescribed these drugs for years and years, well beyond the healthy and safe guidance that was given. And of course, if they try and withdraw on their own without the support that they need, they suffer terribly and often then re-prescribe the drugs because the doctor thinks they're having a relapse, and actually all that they're doing is going through the agonies of withdrawal. So we need to do so much more to support people who take these prescribed drugs. There's also a huge bill. I mean, at least £500 million a year is spent on prescribed drugs for people who the prescription has gone beyond its the period of the guidance. So, as it were, should not be receiving these drugs, doing so and costing the taxpayer £500 million a year. You think of the knock-on effect in terms of health costs. My honourable friend mentioned huge figures there, welfare costs, and of course the human cost. So we need to go beyond these pills. We need to get to an approach to mental health that doesn't only rely on what my honourable friend calls the chemical kosh. Of course, I have some concerns about psilocybin being the next big thing, the next SSRI, then treated and imagined as if it's going to be some new silver bullet, another pill, another shortcut to what is profoundly complex set of mental health circumstances which derive, in many cases, from trauma, in many cases from deep-rooted adverse social and emotional conditions which can't just be wished away by the administration of a new pill.
But can
I'm very happy to give way to my honourable friend. I'm about to come and rebuke my own argument there, but he'll do it better than me. Go on.
Well, no, I'm just going to say, my honourable friend was kind enough to reference the work that has already gone on, and I could cheerfully read into the record that I think I'll list of 15 separate studies here, where the evidence is gradually, despite the Schedule 1, gradually being developed about efficacy, which addresses obviously his very proper concern that this is another mythical silver bullet that will solve the issue. There is only one way for us to fully establish this, but it's already evidentially established sufficiently that we should be doing everything we possibly can to enable this treatment to get underway.
Then I echo that point. And the point I'm making more generally is I'm concerned we withdraw from a medicalised model, which I think it's a bigger topic, but the way we approach health in general can often be over-medicalised, but particularly the mental health field. And I echo the point made by my honourable friend that we have sufficient evidence now to justify a more official review, and I support the call for that. And what I understand, and the honourable lady put the point very well, what we understand to be the case from psilocybin is that it creates this therapeutic window in which talking therapies can then be even more effective, or can be effective, because often frankly, they're not at the moment. So if the administration of this non-toxic, naturally occurring substance can create an opportunity in which a talking therapy can be effective, then that's something that should be welcomed, and there is sufficient evidence to justify us to look at that. So I support the call, particularly for open suggestions, interested to hear what the Minister says, not from his script, about what might be done, and it might well be that the Chief Medical Officer is the best as an office to review this. We do need to be very careful. I do retain my note of caution about leaping forward for another solution that might not deliver what we hope it will, but I also share the hope and the aspiration that members have mentioned. I do recognise the point, and I don't know whether the Minister will make it, that it is possible to conduct research under Schedule 1, but as I think my honourable friend said, it's very difficult, it's very expensive, and in fact it's usually just done by the pharmaceutical companies who see the opportunity for big profit from some new drug, and I am very concerned that we don't class this research in that guise, and in fact I hope there won't be big profits to be made from this naturally occurring substance. And again, it's another topic, but I'm concerned about the MHRA, the way it's funded, the way it licenses treatments. I'm not entirely sure that we're doing the right thing by giving it the power to rubber stamp licenses that have been given abroad. I'm not sure that just speeding up approvals is always right. But I think in this case we do need to conduct this research. And I find myself in a strange position, not only of agreeing with my honourable friend, which I do agree with him on many important matters, as not others, but also that we're taking evidence from, or we're taking inspiration from places like Oregon and Colorado, which I regard as unhelpful places in terms of other things that they're up to. They're the leading jurisdictions promoting assisted suicide, which I strongly disapprove of. I notice Australia is also in the gang. Presumably Canada will be, if not already, full steam ahead for psilocybin. So anyway, Liberals don't get everything wrong, I suppose, is my conclusion, because these places, I think, are paving the way, and in this case, we should follow it. Thank you.
SNP spokesman Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's good to see you in the chair. It's a pleasure to speak in the debate today and to follow the member from Devizes. And a subject I have to admit I had no great prior knowledge, some knowledge, though not great prior knowledge of getting my nose into briefings and articles about a most poorly understood topic, at least I think for members in this House. And as we've heard, various contributions today has been most enlightening, and I will come on to those contributions in just a moment. I would like to pay tribute to my good friend, the member for Inverclyde, who co-sponsors today's debate. My friend is certainly a fan of the road less travelled, and I find the tenacity and good humour for which he approaches the sometimes unfashionable subject of drug reform, not only in this chamber but at home in Scotland, to be a breath of fresh air. And which, as we know, can often be too dominated, I think, especially in this place, by preening truism peddlers who don't challenge either elected members or the general public, who expect us to be able to have debates on substance, on topics which I think that the Honourable Member for Devizes has indicated to have no easy answers, but are nonetheless valuable. I would now like to thank the Honourable Members for Reigate and also especially for Warrington North for showing that there is cross-party support in this House for a sensible, evidence-based approach to drug law reform. And to the Honourable Member of Warrington North first, who talked about access, the prior debate on the access to nature. And we live in these islands surrounded by psilocybin, but importantly, bringing the lived experience of their condition and how this research for rescheduling to number 2 would have a profound impact on those suffering from PTSD. And I not only hope the Minister is listening, but all of us on the front benches are listening, as well as those who advise ministers in government in Whitehall, because I'm sure government ministers will be taking their advice, and I hope they're listening to the lived experience so well and eloquently expressed by the member for Warrington North. And then the member for Reigate, I think, exposed something which all politicians, especially on front benches, need to be very careful about, and proposing white papers which talk about an evidence-based policy-making approach. Well, the evidence seems to be self-evident. And my honourable friend, my good friend, the member for Inverclyde, talked about regulation that we have is based on preconception. I'm maybe going to call it the Mary Whitehouse approach, because it seems to be founded in the Mary Whitehouse approach of the 1950s. And maybe, hopefully, those who advise ministers from both the medical profession, but notably civil servants in Whitehall, will maybe reflect that we now maybe need to take our head out of the sand. So I think it is clear from the contributions in general today that something does need to change with regards to the drug scheduling laws, particularly as they relate to psilocybin. It's a strange time for drug reform. In many ways, we are in this place seem, I think, a good decade, if not even further, behind the attitudes of the wider public and actually other countries who appreciate that the days of endless and expanding prohibition must surely be behind us, and that the so-called war on drugs has been in so many ways not only unwinnable, but actually detrimental to society it seeks to protect. And I think all of us in the front benches really need to take our heads out of the sand and look at the opportunities debates such as this now offer us to change our own views. Now, my party is one I hope that would always support sensible drug policies which uphold the rule of law and make communities safer. Now, I'm afraid that I need to maybe challenge the Minister about the UK Government's continued residence, for example, to even countenance an evidence-based change to drug laws, which seem, at least from my perspective, means letting people down. Now, for those of us in Scotland, we have seen this, for example, in the safe consumption rooms. Now, a policy with proven efficacy across the Western world, which enjoyed cross-party support as a one possible way to reduce terrible toll of drug deaths in many of our constituencies. Yet this was, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, reduced to the level of party politics. Now, I mentioned the government's attitude to opiates there deliberately because in many ways psychedelic drugs are more restricted, as we've already heard from various members, with opiates being licensed for medical and research use, while substances like psilocybin remain on the Schedule 1 list with no medical potential. So this makes it an issue of pretty unique importance. Now, I can understand an argument against, for example, safe consumption rooms, even if I disagree with them. But when it comes to psychedelic compounds, I don't think anyone can have the same arguments regarding addiction and societal breakdown that would have heard around opiates. Now, if members want to have a crash course in opiate addiction, they only need to pick up the Financial Times today to see the profound consequences of opiate addiction, for example, in the city of San Francisco in the United States. It's quite a harrowing article to read and will have consequences for all of us if we don't start to pick up, I think, on some of the issues the member for Reigate highlighted in accessing new medical treatments. Not, I think, as the member for Devizes indicated, as a silver bullet, but as a other tool in the armament for those suffering various conditions. Now, I have to say, that's not just for mental health issues. There are a whole range of usages, or people are using psilocybin or even microdosing with it for many other issues. There are those who are considering using it for ADHD, which is not a mental health issue, but a learning disability. There are those who are using it who, for example, are pre-menopausal, who are menopausal and post-menopausal to deal with the menopause. So I do hope that we have to take it out of just certain silos and see it in the broadest opportunity. But as the Honourable Member for Devizes did say, not as a silver bullet, but just as another element in our armour to deal with a whole range of medical conditions. So I would like to hear from the Minister what they have to say, because I'm not sure the approach is yet cutting through, though I might yet get that wrong. Now, we have also heard from those contributing to date, there are certainly enough examples of the efficacy of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy to meet further research, but the barriers put up by Schedule 1 status make any investment in that research prohibitively expensive. So I have to say, from our side of the House, that needs to change. When we talk about the shrinking numbers of industries, and I think, again, the Honourable Member for Reigate in their I have to say, a fantastic speech that they gave to challenge the government made it very clear that the UK seeks to be a global player. For example, after financial services, the example most given is the pharmaceutical industry. Yet in the area of relative competitive advantage, the government seems to be, and I might be wrong if the Minister wants to get to their feet and change their opinion, is choosing to secede to states, notably in North America and the rest of Europe, which do not share this head-in-the-sand approach. Now, at a time when it's becoming somewhat fashionable for members in here to talk about a mental health crisis, catching up with the lived experience of so many in communities like mine, and that expressed by the Honourable Member for Warrington North, could take advantage of advances in psychiatric pharmacology to improve their lives, those of their families, and to better able to contribute to the community, is something I would recommend to members across the House and to ministers, and actually to those who seem to be advising them to stick their head in the sand. So, to hear about how to overcome problems, we need to rise to the challenge and grasp the opportunity offered by psilocybin and other areas like it, and not to curtail what is a reasonable scientific proposal by sticking our political heads in the sand. So let me conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, with a final appeal to the better judgment of the Minister and those advising him, that they can be safe that they would be able to proceed with a solid trifecta of public support, a solid working hypothesis about how research into psilocybin would work, and a depth of industrial and academic capacity to bring this research forward. And let's see if the Minister has the confidence to do so.
Thank you. Shadow Minister Karin Smyth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I'd like to thank the members for Warrington North, Reigate, Inverclyde and the Backbench Committee for supporting their application and their incredibly moving and very well informed speeches, and I recognise the work that they have done for many years on this subject. We all know in this place, don't we, Madam Deputy Speaker, that many of us take up individual causes that often don't get the numbers and the publicity that they might warrant, but we are dogged in continuing to do that. And I managed to avoid the comments that the Minister had about whether he was the appropriate person or not. I can simply say I'm here on behalf of the Labour Party, very pleased to be here. I serve, and it's beyond my pay grade as to who or why is here, but I'm very pleased to be here to do this. Like the member for West Dunbartonshire, it's a subject that I have also needed to appraise myself of the details, and that, again, is one of the advantages of being able to speak, in my case, from the health team, because it is a case that for more than 50 years now, we've been investigating these drugs as potential treatments for a number of neurological and psychiatric conditions, including, as we've heard, depression. And another wave of research now about these drugs in the treatment of neuropsychiatric disorders, such as treatment-resistant depression, anorexia and PTSD, and we've heard about that very strongly today. Our priority is to improve treatment and prevention services, and particularly to support research. Now, I think the points have been well made, and this is often the case in many subjects, that that falls between health and Home Office in this case, but wherever it falls, it is all our responsibilities, because at the heart of this, and we've heard that strongly today, is the need of people, our constituents, for treatment for these conditions, and they deserve our attention. And we do need, as the motion says, that evidence-led and data-driven interventions. That's why the last Labour government established the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence to balance care with value for money to deliver for individuals and society. This involved rigorous and independent assessment of complex evidence, and that is why, for use of this and other treatments in the NHS, I do strongly support an evidence-based approach and those processes. What this discussion today highlights are the opportunities that are available to us and our constituents through a vibrant life sciences industry, and we are committed to supporting our health sciences industry to improve the health and wealth of our country. That is why I am proud and hugely supportive of our fantastic academic and clinical colleagues in the NHS and UK higher institutions. They are doing world-leading research through the use of both experimental and gold standard clinical trials to look at whether these treatments, amongst others, are helpful for those with severe and enduring mental health conditions. This includes interesting work on the use of psilocybin alongside talking therapies. Now, we do hear much from this government about their commitment to research and development, but it'd be really helpful to hear from the Minister today about what pragmatic support the government are giving to the research sector, universities and pharmaceutical companies to enable more research in this area. It is clear that this work cannot sit in a silo. Following on from the previous adjournment debate on this topic, responded to by the Minister's colleague, the Honourable Member for Croydon South, I would like to know what conversations the Minister has had with counterparts in the Home Office regarding controlled drugs licensing regime to support research and clinical trials in the UK. Additionally, it would be helpful if the Minister would update the House on what Part 2 of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs Advice, which was commissioned in December. I understand that this does fall within his department. It is cross-cutting. He may have had conversations with his health colleagues. But again, following on from that adjournment debate, it would be helpful to have that update. Now, members from across the House have come here today with the goodwill of working, again, cross-party, and we've seen that in evidence this afternoon. And it is crucial that the Minister echoes that sentiment, outlines how the departments are working collaboratively on this matter. But we can't ignore the lack of a wider government strategy on mental health within this debate, particularly in Mental Health Awareness Week. Because for far too long, the government has been dragging its heels on mental health. Last year, they lauded themselves for putting together a 10-year government mental health plan. But like so much that is coming out of this government at the moment, months of consultations, pages of evidence, and vital input from the public and experts, and again, more backsliding on those commitments. The government has to stop pushing things into the long-term grass and get serious about mental health. The long-awaited reform of the Mental Health Act is much needed step in the right direction on improving people's experience with mental health services, but despite the Joint Committee publishing their report on the draft bill, there is still little progress. And if we want to see patients having greater control over treatment options, accessing care tailored to their needs, then this government has to get more serious about mental health services. Because over 7 million people are waiting for NHS treatment, and they are waiting longer than ever before in pain and discomfort. The NHS went into the pandemic with record waiting lists, 100,000 vacancies, and there are over 1.6 million people awaiting mental health treatment alone, with adults waiting 5.4 million hours in A&E while experiencing a mental health crisis, and we've heard about some of those crises today. That is not the place for treatment. Without a proper plan for prevention and early intervention, without a suitable plan behind the workforce, patients will continue to be left behind. Now, even where patients do get a referral, the appropriate course of action for their specific treatment needs is often not available. And that goes to the core of why we're here today: accessibility to tailored mental health support. Across the NHS, there are frequently supply issues with antidepressants that people are dependent upon, medications that's already licensed. Without secure supply chains, how can patients be secure in the knowledge they will continue to receive their prescribed treatment? The anxiety that disruptions to treatment can cause patients cannot be ignored, and that's why it's so crucial that ministers understand the importance of a variety of treatment options and recognise the importance of research and development. So if the Minister could give an update on those supply issues today and the assessment of stock availability, that would also be welcomed by people looking in on this debate. The government needs to get a grip on mental health services, and if they don't, we will. We will put prevention and early intervention at the forefront of our approach to mental health. We will place mental health and specialists in every school and place an open access hub for young people in every single community. We will double the number of district nurses qualifying every year. We will create those additional nursing and midwifery placements in the health service. We will double the number of medical school places so that we have the doctors our NHS needs. And we will guarantee mental health treatment within a month by recruiting an extra 8,500 mental health staff. We will reform the NHS to shift its focus to early diagnosis and intervention, as well as preventing ill health in the first place. And working with leading figures within research, life sciences and patient care will be a huge part of this going forward. I want to give the time for the Minister to respond. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I don't think in the years I've served as a Minister I can recall a debate in which expectations have been set so low about my response before I've even stood up. But I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Reigate, the honourable member for Inverclyde, and the honourable member for Warrington North for securing the debate. And I'm grateful to them and all the others who've had an opportunity to contribute. This is the first debate I've participated in on this subject, as other colleagues have said, and I know the House has raised the topic of psilocybin and other psychedelic drugs with my honourable friend, the Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire. I appreciate my honourable friend, the member for Reigrate's disappointment that the Minister isn't able to be with us today and to respond directly to his concerns, but I'm afraid he was drawn away on other departmental business today. I recognise that this is a topic of substantial interest to members of the House. They've made, again, the case with passion and...
I wonder if you could give just a little bit of detail about the duties that have taken the Drugs Minister away from the House today.
I can't tell them, I'm afraid. I don't know the precise departmental visit that my honourable friend is on, but I'm sure, knowing the member for Croydon South, that if he was here, he would certainly wish to be part of this debate and to continue the conversation that he's had with the honourable gentleman. It's only because of other departmental business that he wasn't able to join us today. But I wanted to begin by recognising, as others have obviously done, the personal interest in this topic that the honourable member for Warrington North has, and to concur with the comments of you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the honourable member spoke with great conviction and spoke very deeply. I've seen her speak on other subjects that we have shared interest in, such as the fight against anti-Semitism, with the same eloquence and bravery that she showed today. It may be helpful at the outset to remind the House that medicines policy, including the availability of medicines for prescribing, is led by the Department for Health. Medicines are licensed and regulated by the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. However, the Home Office is responsible for controlled drugs legislation, and our controlled drugs licensing regime supports research and clinical trials in the UK. The two departments do work together on issues connected to controlled drugs in healthcare, and I will endeavour to set out the government's position this afternoon. Controlled drugs legislation seeks to prevent criminality whilst also permitting access for legitimate use, including for medicines development. The Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2001 enabled the use of controlled drugs in healthcare, and the Home Office's controlled drugs licensing regime enables the possession, supply, production, import and export of controlled drugs to support industry, pharmaceutical research and healthcare. These controls are subject to review in light of any emerging evidence and in consultation with the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, which has been referenced many times this afternoon. There is an established process for medicines, including those which contain controlled drugs, to be developed, evaluated in clinical trials and licensed based on an assessment of their quality, safety and efficacy by the MHRA. The MHRA supports the safe and scientifically sound conduct of clinical trials in this area and provides regulatory and scientific advice to companies at all stages of developing medicines. Should a company submit an application for a marketing authorization, otherwise known as a product license, it will ultimately be a decision for the MHRA whether to license. I'll just finish the sentence and I'll come to the Honourable Lady. Whether to license a product based on a psychedelic drug as a therapy. I'll happily give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. He refers to market authorisation, and in this case, psilocybin, as we've discussed, is something that grows in mushrooms right across the UK. Is the Minister suggesting that people would only be able to access psilocybin if it was in another substance?
Well, I think what I'm suggesting, I'm by no means an expert in this field, but that were this to be a drug which is licensed, then it would need to go through the MHRA process in the usual way. I would like to come to a point that she made earlier, which is around the costs involved in a first-time application for a controlled drug licence of the kind we've been discussing. She quoted a substantial figure, which would be concerning clearly as prohibitively costly for smaller manufacturers or researchers. The figures that I've been quoted today is that a first-time application for a licence costs £3,700 and renewal costs £326 for a standard renewal. But perhaps I'll write to the Honourable Lady with those figures, and if she contests them in any way, then myself or the other Minister would be happy to respond to her.
The cost to research isn't just about the licence. Because it's a class 1 drug, more dangerous than heroin, the way in which it's stored within laboratories, the people who get access to it, the setup you have to have around that laboratory is what caused a lot of people to say, we simply can't afford to make these modifications to our laboratories, and therefore start off the investigation in the first place.
I can see that point, and I'm going to come on in a moment to the work that the government is doing in this regard and more broadly to facilitate research and to make it more accessible to a broader range of organisations. If I could just finish the point about the process involved here. Once granted a medicines licence by the MHRA, medicines can then be assessed by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence, which makes recommendations about routine prescribing on the NHS. I'd like to thank the honourable members who have described the promising research emerging on the potential benefits of psilocybin. I'll mention that studies in the UK include publicly funded research. For example, the National Institute for Health and Care Research is funding King's College London to carry out a trial evaluating the feasibility, safety and efficacy of psilocybin for adults unresponsive to or intolerant of treatments for depression. And in January of last year, King's College London published the results of a small-scale study suggesting that psilocybin can be administered safely under certain circumstances and to healthy individuals. This is clearly encouraging. However, I'll finish the point and I'll come to the Honourable Gentleman. However, the researchers acknowledge that larger and longer trials, including comparison with existing treatments, would be required to determine the efficacy and safety of psilocybin for this disorder. Please to give way.
I hope by now, as my right honourable friend has read his text out, he's beginning to work out that the administration of drugs policy is, shall we say, suboptimal. But I've got one specific question for you. Could you explain to us why esketamine is approved in Scotland but not in England?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll happily ask officials listening to this to respond. That sounds like it's a matter for the Department for Health rather than for the Home Office, but I'll be pleased to give him a fulsome reply to that as soon as possible.
Perhaps let me explain the issue that sits underneath it, if I may.
Okay, well, if he already knows the answer to the question, then I wonder why he asked it in the first place.
As my right friend of mine, one doesn't ask questions to which you don't know the answer. It's not very wise thing in politics. But the point of issue was raised with me by the public affairs director of a subsidiary of a major pharmaceutical company about the differential treatment between physical and mental health treatments. And it is illustrative of the difficulty of getting mental health treatments away to the necessary standard for assessment by NICE, and it's a further illustration of the difference of priority between mental health conditions treatment and physical health conditions treatment.
Well, my honourable friend makes that point very powerfully, and of course it's the ambition of the government to ensure that NICE, the MHRA and all our regulators work in the most research-friendly manner, and that is with respect to mental health treatments as much as it is to anything else. If a manufacturer is successful in being granted a marketing authorisation by the MHRA for a medicine containing psilocybin, the Home Office's commitment is that it will act swiftly to move psilocybin from Schedule 1 and make it available for prescribing. Let me finish this point from subject to advice from the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs on the appropriate scheduling and safeguards for the medicine. The same scrutiny should be applied to all potential medicines to ensure potential patient safety, while it's legally possible to enable prescribing in advance of marketing authorisation. There's no plans at present for the government to move to that position. Give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. The Minister keeps referring to medicines containing psilocybin, but what he doesn't seem to be understanding is that psilocybin is the medicine in and of itself. It doesn't need to be added to something else to make it work. And this is why we're running into the issue, because the government keeps asking us and keeps telling us about this licensing regime in which they are required to do something else to the compound, to add something to it, to make it some sort of novel substance, rather than looking at the substance that already exists and, as we've said, has been used for thousands of years with demonstrated safety and efficacy. Will the Minister talk about psilocybin and not medicines containing psilocybin?
Well, I understand the point that the Honourable Lady is making. As I've already described, the government is funding research into psilocybin and its impacts on patients with certain conditions. What we're discussing here today is the Home Office's role in ensuring that that research, as it emerges, can be considered as part of our drugs legalisation framework. The government has commissioned the ACMD to consider how to better enable research with respect to all Schedule 1 drugs, including the potential to extend Schedule 2 status for research purposes to all Schedule 1 drugs, including psilocybin. And this is the point that my right honourable friend, the Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire, made, I believe, in the adjournment debate. And he has written to the ACMD to ask them to consider in particular the potential options available to extend Schedule 2 status for research purposes to all Schedule 1 drugs. He highlighted specifically psilocybin in this letter. If the Honourable Lady or my right honourable friend or indeed other interested members haven't seen that, then I'd be happy to ensure that they receive a copy and can see the instructions that the Minister has given to the ACMD to ask them to take this forward. There was a question, I think, from my honourable friend for Reigate earlier about the likely timetable for any advice from the ACMD, and I've been advised that whilst obviously they're independent of government, it is understood that their consideration is well advanced, and we should expect advice from them in the near future. The approach that we've taken in this regard should deliver much of what my honourable friend, the member for Reigate, and others are requesting. I would distinguish prescribing. Prescribing will remain unavailable outside of a clinical trial. It's not for the Home Office to determine medicines policy, and I'm sure that he and others will accept the general principle that medicines should be assessed on their safety, quality and efficacy before they're made available to patients. The two departments continue to support the ACMD's review. The Chief Scientific Advisor to the Home Office recently convened a discussion with her counterpart in the Department for Health and Social Care and the Government's Chief Medical Officer on this precise subject. I understand that they had a very positive discussion, and I know that they will be advocating for the best outcome for researchers and, of course, for patients. When the ACMD provides its advice, the Government will consider it carefully before deciding how to proceed. I'd like to thank, in closing, members for their contributions for today's debates. I can assure my honourable friend, the member for Reigate, and others that the Government has heard what they have to say. I will ensure that my right honourable friend, the member for Croydon South, is fully appraised of what was said in the debate today, so that he and others can continue their conversation on this issue. I'd like to reassure the whole House that the Government agrees with the intent of much of what has been debated today, but rather than developing a bespoke approach for psilocybin alone, we consider our approach to be more ambitious and want to tackle this issue across all categories of Section 1 drugs to reduce barriers to legitimate research rather than focus on individual drugs. Equally, we must keep a firm focus on the need to tackle drug misuse, which causes such harm across our society. Both of these are vitally important aims, and we'll continue working to strike the right balance in the interests of the public. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank all members who have come today to support the debate. I, along with my honourable friend, and he is a friend, the member for Reigate, am disappointed in the Government's response to the debate today, where yet again we're seeing a real lack of urgency on this issue from the Government. As we've heard discussed, this review from the ACMD has been ongoing since 2017, and in that time at least 40,000 people have taken their own lives. I am grateful for the fact that the Minister said that he will take back the contents of today's discussion to the Minister, who should have been here today and unfortunately wasn't, because I'm really keen that this is something that we finally progress, and I thank all members who have taken part in this debate in order to make that case clearly and cogently to the Government that this is something that we cannot accept the Government's continued inertia on any longer. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order papers, is that opinion say aye?
Aye.
The contrary, no. I thought there might have been a no today, actually. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.